state. In other words, all I care about is my people. And we got a plague. And we got to find out who the murderer of Laius is. And that's the end of it. So that's what I've got to do. Tiresias will finish, and he says, I go then, having said the things I came to say. No fear then compels me. Thine is not the power to hurt me. And I say, this man whom thou art seeking out with threats, as murderer of Laius, he is here in show, an alien sojourner. In other words, he's not Theban, alien. But in truth, a homeborn Theban. In other words, he comes right from here. No delight to him will that discovery bring. Blind, having seen. Poor, having rolled in wealth. The irony is, of course, he's speaking directly to Oedipus and telling him, he, with a staff, feeling his way to other lands, shall go. This is exactly the way the play is going to end, with Oedipus walking off with help from his daughters. And by his sons shall he be known at once, father and brother, and of her who bore him, husband and son, sharing his father's bed, his father's murderer. Whoever killed Laius was the son of Laius. Whoever slept with Jocasta is Jocasta's son. Incest. Go thou then wherein, and brood o'er this, and if thou findest me fail, say that my skill in prophecy is gone. In other words, Tiresias says, that's all I got to say to you. Whoever killed Laius, he was related to him. And then he turned around and he slept with his own mother and had children. Brood on that for a while. And then he leaves. Right? The chorus next will speak, and it's confused, right? Obviously, the question is, who do you believe, Oedipus or Tiresias and the gods, right? We then will have an exchange. The next exchange is between Oedipus and Creon. And Oedipus is ready to accuse Creon of working with Tiresias to try to take over his throne by suggesting that there's something dubious about Oedipus as king. They will fight, and in the process of fighting, the chorus tries to step in, and the chorus says, to one who fears to fall, he speaketh well, O king, swift counsels are not always safe. In other words, you better think about what you're saying. Oedipus, however, is enraged at Creon. He's certain, he's convinced that Creon is behind all of this, and that it's Creon who started all this mess in the first place. Going off to the oracle, coming back and saying the one that killed Laius, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, there has been a reading of this play that says, are you ready for this? Somehow Creon knows all along that Oedipus is sketch. Somehow he knows. And so he never goes to no oracle. He just comes back and says what he knows to be true, that the killer of Laius has to be found because he knows that Oedipus is the guilty god. And then all he has to do is just watch this all unfold. That's a more cynical reading of the play. The Greeks certainly had no view of this. They believed. Creon went, talked to the oracle. The oracle said, whoever killed Laius has got to be found. And now Oedipus is going to jack on Creon. He says it this way. When a man is swift in wily schemes, swift must I be to battle plot with plot. In other words, I know Creon. He thinks he's a smart guy. I'm just as smart as he is. And if I stand and wait, he wins the day, and all my life is found one great mistake. The irony there, right? He says, I'm not going to sit around and watch Creon ruin me and this city. Creon says, what seekest thou then? Drive me from the land? Oh, you're going to exile me? No, not so. Oedipus says, I seek not banishment, but death. Whoa! He's ready to kill Creon. Creon goes, oh, what proof? You got to have proof to be able to kill me. Finally, Creon will say, Oedipus will say, you have to obey me. And Creon will say, not to a tyrant ruler. And this is one of the reasons why the play is sometimes referred to as Oedipus Tyrannus, the tyrant. However, in Greek, the word Tyrannus actually can also mean coming from an unclear point of view or a position. In other words, to be a king, but not inheriting necessarily directly the line of kingship. That's also what Tyrannus can mean in that language. Well, they're ready to kill each other when Jocasta shows up, right? She breaks them up. You then have Oedipus and Jocasta, who will go through a series of comments and observations where Jocasta will begin to tell a story that will, of course, begin the end of the play, right? She says, there came to Laius once an oracle. I say not that it came from Phobos himself, but from his servants, that his fate was fixed by his son's hand to fall. In other words, he would have a son who would kill him. His own and mine. And him, so rumor runs, a robber band of aliens slew, where meet the three great roads. In other words, there's a rumor that Laius was killed at the crossroads. Nor did 3 days succeed the infant's birth before by other hands he cast him forth. In other words, he got rid of his son, maiming his ankles. The origination of the name Oedipus means swollen foot, on a lonely hill. Here then Apollo failed to make the boy his father's murderer, nor did Laius die by his son's hand. Let's point out that throughout the next series of lines, Jocasta will, it almost seems, taunt the gods and the oracles by saying, Apollo thought that he was making some prophecy about some child that was born to us, me and Laius, who was going to grow up and kill him. But clearly we fooled the gods, didn't we? We sent that child away to die on a mountain all alone. So fared the oracles. Therefore, she says to her husband's son, Oedipus, regard them not. Whate'er the god desires to search, he will himself declare. A darkly ironic line. Oedipus, we're told, is trembling now. Oh, what a fearful boding. Thoughts disturbed thrill through my soul, my queen, at this thy tale. They will exchange, of course, back and forth. Now, what means this shuddering, this averted glance? Oedipus asked, I thought I heard thee say that Laius died, slain in a skirmish, where the three roads meet. Jocasta says, so is it said, and still the rumors hold. Oedipus says, where was the spot in which this matter passed? Jocasta says, well, they call the country Phocis, and the roads from Delphi and from Dalia there converge. Oedipus, what time? What interval has passed since then? Jocasta says, but just before thou camest to possess and rule this land, the tidings were proclaimed. Oedipus says, great Zeus, what fate hast thou decreed for me? And let's put it in our notes. This is a play about fate. This is no question a play about things are going to work out the way they're going to work out. Whether Oedipus stays in Corinth or he leaves, either way, right? What thought is this, my Oedipus of thine? Oedipus says, ask me not yet, but tell of Laius's frame, his build, his features, and his years of life. Again, the irony. It's as if Oedipus has been living and enjoying his life without ever asking about the past. It's as if he didn't want to know anything about Laius. And now he asks, hey, what did Laius look like, by the by? We don't have any pictures back in the day, right? No way to, represent it. Can you tell me what he looked like? Mama says, tall was he, and the white hair snowed his head, and in his face, not much unlike to thee. Ironic. Well, come to think of it, he kind of looked like you, which seems to suggest it as well. Jocasta has not really given much thought to who this kid is that showed up and solved the riddle of the Sphinx and all of that, right? Oedipus says, and this will become the word of the play. If you need one word for this play, it is the word woe, usually translated as woe, because it's hard to translate this Greek word other than woe, or for T.S. Eliot in The Hollow Man, alas. That's really the translation. It's like, oh no, how do you spell that sound? Oh, how do you spell that sound? In translation, we'll often just spell it as woe, or like, oh no, right? Or don't, right? Woe is me, so seems it I have plunged all blindly into curses terrible. Blindly, of course, is significant, because at the end of the play, Oedipus will in fact blind himself when he finally realizes the horrific thing that he's done. Jocasta will tell us that there were 5 people altogether, and of them one was a herald and one chariot had he, right? Oedipus is again, oh no, this is bad. Jocasta says, there was a servant who alone escaped with life. Oedipus says, I want to talk to that servant. And she asks, why? Why do you want to talk to the servant? Oedipus says, I fear, O queen, that words best left unsaid have passed these lips. and therefore wish to see him. She's like, yeah, okay, all right, why though? What's the deal? Oedipus now begins to tell his story. I had a father, he says, Polybus of Corinth, right? And Merope of Doris was my mother. I was at a supper. A man chanced at supper in his cup. He was drunk, right? To revile me as a spurious changeling boy, called me a bastard. In other words, questioned who I was and where I came from. He said, and so I went unknown to my parents to Pytho, to the oracle, and the god sent me forth shamed, unanswered in my quest. And more, he added, dread and dire and dark, how that the doom of incest lay on me, most foul, unnatural, and that I should be father of children men would loathe to look on, and murderer of the father that begot me. And hearing this, I cast my wistful looks to where the stars hang over Corinth's tower, and fled where never more mine eyes would see the shame of those dire oracles fulfilled. In other words, Oedipus seems to somehow be escaping the will of the gods here and proving the gods wrong, right? Now, much has been made about the fact that in Plato's text, Apology, that Socrates says something very similar. A friend of mine went to the Delphi oracle, and the oracle said the wisest man on the earth was Socrates, and I had to go around and prove the god wrong. Now, the irony, of course, is that Socrates is really proving the god right by pointing out that he really is the wisest man. But here we have the same game being played. Oedipus says, I left Corinth and I ran away, right? With rough and hasty words, he then tells about what happened at the crossroads. They drove me from the road, the driver first, and that old man himself, and then in rage, I struck the driver who had turned me back. And when the old man saw it, watching me as by the chariot side I stood, he struck my forehead with a double-pointed goad. But we were more than quits. For in a tryst with his right hand, I struck him with my staff. He rolled backwards from his chariot seat, and then I slew them all. Really? You never thought maybe to tell this story? Jocasta, really? You never thought to ask anything about this story? So in other words, the stories start to converge. And if it chance that Laius and this stranger are akin, what man more wretched than this man who speaks? What man more harassed by the vexing gods? And 'twas I, none other, who against myself proclaimed these curses, he says. And the bed of him that died, I with my hands by which he fell defile. Am I not vile by nature, all unclean? He finishes his statement, and then the chorus is ready to say, us too, O king, these things perplex, yet still, till thou hast asked the man who was by, have hope. In other words, that doesn't, just because you killed somebody at the crossroads doesn't necessarily mean that it was Laius. You have to have some hope. And then Oedipus says, and this indeed is all my hope, waiting until that shepherd slave appear. Jocasta is starting to get a little bit worried. And when he comes, what meanest thou to ask? Oedipus, I'll tell thee. Should he now repeat the tale thou toldst to me, it frees me from this guilt. In other words, the question of math. Math will solve my problem. You said that the rumor is there were a whole bunch of robbers that attacked and killed Laius. Right? I was alone when I did what I did. Jocasta says, what special word was that you heard from me? Oedipus says, thou saidst, he told that robbers slew his lord. And should he give their number as the same now as before? It was not I who slew him. For one man could not be the same as many. Many scholars have said that's the most important line of the play. It's fun to read scholars who will have different opinions about this play. Some will say that's the most important line of the play. One man cannot be many. And yet, of course, Oedipus is one man who is in fact many. He's not just husband, he's also son, for example. Just one example of many of that, right? What's ironic here as well, let's put this in our notes, is that finally when Oedipus gets the chance to ask the one man who got away, he never actually asks him this question about the robbers. It's at that point that Oedipus is ready to take on fully the guilt, right, that is his. In the end, of course, Oedipus will say, I really do, I want to meet this guy, and I'm going to hope that it's all going to work out. Before the end of this, however, Jocasta she will say it this way. As I, for one, both now and evermore, will count all oracles as things of naught. In other words, several times Jocasta will say this. These oracles, seriously, you cannot believe this crap, okay? These gods, they don't know what they're talking about. Look, they said that that kid that we had was going to grow up and kill Laius and marry me. Well, obviously that didn't happen because we sent him away to die on a mountainside. Oracles, schmoracles, really? This irreverence for the gods, I think, in many ways, stands behind a lot of what Sophocles is saying to his Greek audience. Be very careful about trying to make fun of those gods. For example, suggesting that maybe they aren't real, or maybe they don't know the truth, or whatever, right? In other words, beware of skepticism. It's at this point the chorus is left alone, and they will say some very interesting words, but pride begets the mood of tyrant power, pride filled with many thoughts, yet filled in vain. I cannot cease to call on God for aid, the chorus will say. And then enters Jocasta with the messenger. And the messenger says, I've got good news, which is, of course, ironically going to end up as bad news. Polybus is dead, right? And Jocasta will, in fact, taunt the gods. He says it. Now, oracles of God, where are you now? Long since my Oedipus fled, fearing lest his hand should slay the man, and now he dares, and now he dies by fate, and not by him. In other words, I told you, Oedipus, see, I told you. Oedipus shows up. Oedipus wants to know what's going on. Jocasta says, this man's tale is going to tell you. And when you hear it, see the woeful plight of those dread oracles. I mean, you can just hear the irony dripping. In other words, she's like, really? You said you were going to kill your dad and marry your mom. Well, guess what? Your dad is dead. Polybus is dead. Oedipus is like, no way, right? Again, she says a little bit later, so Polybus is gone, and with him lie in Hades whelmed those worthless oracles. Right? Oedipus will say it that way. He's joining in, piling on with Jocasta, if you will, right? And then Jocasta said, did I not tell you this long time ago? And Oedipus says, thou didst, but I was led away by fears. She says, dismiss them then, forever with thy thoughts, silliness. Oedipus says, and yet, that incest, must I not fear that? Jocasta says, what are you talking about? Right? The whole thing about, well, yeah, I know my dad is dead, but there's that whole thing about the other part of the prophecy that I was going to sleep with my mom. If I go back to Corinth and I become the king of Corinth, I could end up doing that. Oof, I'm not sure I want to do that. Jocasta, why should we fear when chance rules everything and foresight of the future there is none? 'Tis best to live at random as one can. The idea here, of course, is dark irony. She says, forget about it. But thou, fear not that marriage with thy mother. Such things men oft have dreams of. But who cares the least about them lives the happiest. Now, this is the line, of course, that Freud will concentrate on when he studies this play, and when he shares his famous Oedipal complex, as we know of it. The idea that psychologically all young boys want to kill their father and be with their mother, but because they can't, they have to go off. And ironically, boys, young men, when they decide to find women, end up looking for women that are very similar to the mothers that raised them. Yeah, I'll let you get into that and do your own research. And we'll have more to say about that in a minute here at 3A, but that's kind of where that one all leads to, right? And Odysseus, Oedipus then will go on to ask a question to the messenger, because the messenger says, well, there's no reason to worry about sleeping with your mother. That wasn't really your mom. What are you talking about? Oh, no, you were a foundling. Polybus was not your father. You were brought to him by a shepherd who brought you. Oedipus will ask, did not Polybus beget me? The messenger says, no more than he thou speakest to, just as much. Right? And of course this then leads to, well, what's going on? Well, he says it. I saved you from an evil plight. You were a child who was going to be left on a mountain. Your little feet were pinned together. And Oedipus is like, well, who gave me my name? Dude, ask your mom. I don't know. You were called Oedipus, right? And he says, someone gave you me? Or gave you the child? That ended up being me? Yeah. Who was that person? Well, I don't know. He was a shepherd of Laius's, I guess. It's at this point Then, of course, the audience begins to realize that everything is lining up, right? Jocasta will finish, and her final words, let's pay attention to them, because all of a sudden she starts to realize something is going on here. Whom did he speak of? Care not thou for it, but wish his words may be but idle tales. Oedipus says, no, no, no. I cannot fail, once getting on the scent to track at last the scent of the secret of my birth. I will. The word picture he uses, I'm like a bloodhound on the scent. I've got to find out who was my real mother and father. If I was brought and given to Polybus, then where did I come from? Why was I left on a mountain all alone? Jocasta says, by the gods, the irony of that, if that thou valuest life, inquire no further. Let my woe suffice. She knows what's going on. She says, will you just stop? Shut up. Now, this is what makes Oedipus not a villain, but a tragic hero. He wants to be a good king. Save the city from the plague. He wants to answer the oracle that was sent through Creon to find the murderer of Laius. He wants to find out about his birth. He wants to know. I want to know, which is a question we raised in our Milton lectures over Paradise Lost. Is wanting to know a good thing or a bad thing? Because Jocasta has just told him, it's sometimes better to not know. Right? To not know. This is always one of those really interesting questions, right? Find two people who become very, very close with each other and decide they want to fall in love. Should they ask the question, tell me everything about your past because I want to know? Or should pasts be left alone? Some of you smiling, right? Because this is a very, very, this is the question. Jocasta says, stop asking any more